Hey guys, back again. So this week I'm here to talk about something that's quite different to anything that I've talked about before, though I've done a little bit of World War II and other kinds of history as well. So this one's going to be about the Normandy landings. That's the D-Day landings. So this week was the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings, which happened on June the 6th, 1944. Now, this is something that has been portrayed in popular culture multiple different times across novels and comics and TV shows and books, movies, and of course video games. So I wanted to go through my experience of the Normandy landings, or the D-Day landings, which were the single largest naval invasion in all of human history. So the question here really is, which one was the best? So I'm going to start with the incredible game Medal of Honor Allied Assault, which came out in 2002, and this is the Omaha beach level. So Medal of Honor Allied Assault, as I mentioned, came out in 2002. So at that time I would have been in school, and this was my first video game experience of that level. So just to sort of give you an idea of what it was like back then. So when I first played the game, I remember the opening intro cinematic, which was a couple of minutes, and it gives a little bit of the history of what happened, and the monologue mentions the 50-mile stretch of the Normandy coast and the assault on Hitler's vaunted Atlantic War. And the interesting thing now is that I kind of look back on this, and there are little touches, little bits of history in the game that I wouldn't have really appreciated back then. But even as a schoolboy, it was enough that I picked up on the important bits. So I remember watching that opening cinematic, and they show the D-Day landings, but I wasn't actually expecting to be able to play that level. It was a complete surprise to me, because when you first play the game, and I played a demo first, if anyone remembers what demos were, you used to get a disc on the front of a magazine, and that would have sort of a single level of the game, and I remember it said in big capital letters, massive 150 megabyte demo, which is quite laughable when you think about how small 150 megabytes is considered today. But I remember being in school, and I'd been playing the game, and it was getting a little bit late, and I should have been going to school the next day. So I thought, let me finish this level, and then I will go to bed. And instead, what happened is that the screen in the game kind of went black, and I thought, has this thing crashed? Because from time to time your PC would just crash. That's the way that was. And then I could hear the ocean, and in white text on the black screen comes up June 6th, 1944, Omaha Beach. And then of course the level begins, and I'm in one of the landing craft, and I'm looking around in the game. It's a first-person game, Medal of Honor, which came before Call of Duty, but we'll get to that. And I remember being in the ship, in the landing craft, which is going forward quite quickly, and there's a man yelling orders at you. And I think one of the guys, and it was the same in the intro cinematic of the game, one of the guys in front of you or behind you, I forget now, is throwing up. Now the interesting thing about the Medal of Honor games is that they're very PG. Although it's a World War II game, there's next to no violence. So you see the guy is kind of meant to be vomiting, but there's nothing coming out. So this game came out in early 2000s, and it was really the beginning of the time when video games were beginning to give a little bit of what big budget Hollywood movies could give you back then. The soundtrack by Michael Giacchino, which is in the opening cinematic, has the Medal of Honor theme, which he created, I think, and Michael Giacchino, if you know anything about soundtracks, has done a number of different soundtracks. He did Lost, which was very memorable. He did Mission Impossible 3. He did Up. He's done a bunch of different movies and TV shows. But I still remember that theme, that Medal of Honor Allied Assault theme. I still go back to it. I still listen to it today, and I still watch that opening cinematic. But going back to the actual Omaha Beach level, you're speeding along in the landing craft, and then you start hearing explosions and water being thrown up into the air, and you're kind of looking around and feeling a bit nervous, and then you sort of look to your left because you see a couple of more explosions in the water, and you see other landing craft on either side of you, and then the one directly to the left of you gets blown out of the water. And of course, the concern there is, oh, hey, is this gonna, am I gonna be blown out of the water before I even reach the beach? Going back to the opening cinematic, I still remember the man yelling, prepare for landing, right before the front of the landing vehicle opens up. But in the game, you're playing the level, the front of the opening the front of the landing vehicle opens up, and of course a bunch of men are immediately cut down as soon as they try to leave the landing craft. And then you've got the tank traps, which were meant for tanks. Of course, the Nazis were expecting tanks in the Allied invasion of Europe, and that's your only cover. There's not very much of it, and you can see, you can't see the actual guns themselves, but you can see the bullets flying towards you from the MG42, and it's kind of scant cover. There's not too much of it, and you get behind what you can. And the thing is, with this level, I couldn't count the number of times that I died. Because what would happen is you don't really know which direction you're meant to be going on. You're meant to be working your way up the beach, but knowing exactly where you're heading is very difficult. And as soon as you'd kind of pop your head up, you'd just you'd get hit by a hail of bullets, and then you'd die. And of course, it's a video game, so as soon as you die, what happens is you just start the level again. And of course, there are certain moments through the level as you're working your way up the beach. There's a medic, and the medic says, hey, you look like you need this, and hands you a med pack. Of course, once again, it's a video game, the Medal of Honor series, just like Call of Duty. They're not soldier sims like, say, Operation Flashpoint. They're arcadey kind of shooters. So, if you get hit by a bullet, you just lose a bit of health, and then maybe you can get a med pack, and then you're right as rain again, and you keep working up the beach. And I remember there was a moment as well where a guy is on the floor, and he's kind of yelling, and he's like, oh, my guts are falling out. And you look at him, and there's no guts. There's no gore in any of these games. They don't show any of that. So, because, like I said, it's very PG-13. They're trying to appeal to a teenage audience so they can sell more of these games. And although, knowing what I know today about the history of what happened that day, like, the video games are very much not like that. There's no blood, there's no gore. If you get injured, you just get a med pack. If you die, you just start the level again. But in a way, it did teach me how sort of dangerous it was, in that you could die 2 dozen times, probably. Anywhere between 12 and 2 dozen times I died, I would say, before I got to the end of the beach and made it into the bunkers. It was very easy to die. And that was my first video game experience of Omaha Beach, and it was absolutely incredible. And of course, by the time I'm sort of at the tank traps trying to make my way up the beach, I'd completely forgotten that I was meant to be going to sleep to try and get up for work, for school the next morning. But that was the power of that level, and the way that it opened with the screen going black and then the white text, June 6, 1944, Omaha Beach. The sound design, the difficulty of the level, the men running up the beach and then they're being flung sort of 20 feet into the air. It really showed how, at least back then in the early 2000s, how incredible that experience was, that I still remember it today. And it's interesting remembering now the sort of different moments where you kind of get to the end of the beach, to the shingles, to the barbed wire that you need to get past, and then somebody yells some orders at you and says, "Pal, get back down the beach and grab those bangalores." And of course, when you're playing this, you're thinking, I just made it up the beach and I've died a dozen times already just to get here, and you're now telling me to go back down the beach to get something? Like, what? Fortunately, it's not too far back that you have to grab the bangalores, which were these kind of long pipe explosive things, and of course, you hand them to some guy and he starts putting them together, and then he lights them and throws them over the shingles or the barbed wire, and that creates an opening in the barbed wire for the men, the American soldiers on Omaha Beach, to then run through that, and then to continue trying to get up to the bunkers and to the pillboxes up on the cliffs up there. And of course, as soon as that opening is created, a bunch of those soldiers are then cut down. And it's great. It's a video game, so of course you can switch between different weapons, and there's a moment where you're given orders to get out your rifle. It's a sniper rifle with a scope, and you have to kind of take out the men at the gun nests and their MG42s, and you make your way through a minefield and then into the bunkers, and you take your Tommy gun, your Thompson, and you start working your way through the bunkers, and killing the soldiers in there and clearing them out for the rest of the invasion. And once you do get into those concrete structures at the top, and you've taken out the men on the MG42s, you can look down on the beach and see other soldiers coming up. And that was an incredible experience. And I think that maybe it was just the timing, where the graphics were just getting good enough that you could do something like that you could have enough soldiers on screen at that time. The early Medal of Honor games, which I didn't really play, my understanding is that they're kind of quite sparse. You're in buildings, you're in corridors, as opposed to the Omaha Beach level, which I don't know that anybody had ever created anything like that before, where you're seeing dozens of soldiers around you being blown up, coming from the landing craft, hiding behind the tank traps and trying to make their own way up. But I just think it was kind of lightning in a bottle in a way at the time. Everything was perfect. Michael Giacchino's score, sound design, the graphics just getting just about good enough. Absolutely fantastic. And in terms of where it's placed in my experience of depictions of D-Day in popular culture, putting aside the fact that it's a video game, it's arcadey, it's not a soldier sim, it's not really realistic, but it does have little touches of history, like the guns being correct. The M1 Garand makes that ping sound once your clip runs out, and the names of the guns and all of that. It has at least a bit of authenticity, and the Medal of Honor games were actually created by Steven Spielberg, who we'll get back to, but they were created as a way of teaching a younger generation about World War II in a more kind of interactive way. But this is going to be the first of a few different videos, because I wanted to go through some of the other depictions of D-Day or the Normandy landings in other popular media as well. So expect to see another couple of videos on this exact topic going forward. Thanks so much for getting to the end of this video, guys, and I will look forward to seeing your comments and hearing what it is that you have to say. You know, did you play the Medal of Honor Allied Assault Omaha beach level? What was your experience of that? What was it like for you? Did it have the same kind of effect on you that it did for me? What was it like playing that game? Thanks ever so much again, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care. Goodbye.